Hiya, Honest Discussioner here. How's everybody doing? And also, hiya, James. It's been a long time since we've done anything on YouTube, at least in relation to each other. I think we're a bit overdue for this discussion, are we not? James, by the way, to my audience, DasAmericanAtheist, made a response to my response to Angry Drunken Theist on free will. And yes, James, I do talk about free will a lot, but in my defense, it's been at least a year since I've talked about this prior to my previous aforementioned video, so I don't think I'm entirely beating a dead horse so much as a semi-alive horse, let's say. Now, James brings up 2 points against my argument. Minorly, he states that soft determinism, for all intents and purposes, is unfalsifiable, and I agree with him wholeheartedly that there is little place in discussion for unfalsifiable claims as to what we should believe. However, I think James and I are both mistaken about soft determinism. I always thought of soft determinism as, well, hard determinism, just with the possibility of some sort of randomness or quantum fluctuations, making it not fatalism. But when I went to go double check, it seems as though soft determinism is another word for compatibilism, the idea that determinism is compatible with free will, which I am really not a proponent of in any way, shape, or form. My position is not only that free will does not exist in any form, but that the very concept closely resembles a logical contradiction. Rather than appeal to any form of determinism, I merely need to appeal to basic causality. To dispel the myth of free will, things happen for a reason. Even if part of the reason is random quantum mechanics, that does not take away from the fact that our mental thoughts are caused, or shall I say determined, by factors outside of our control. Unless one is to deny the truth that our neurochemical brains are affected by everything from how much sugar we've had to our DNA to just random hormonal changes, then there isn't much room for free will, as your eventual decision is affected by all of these factors, or at least most of them, and they're generally out of your control. Now, admittedly, this only dispels a broad notion of free will, more common to theistic belief, and likely it's not the kind that Das is arguing for, if he's even arguing for any type of free will. Mainly, his video is just a critique of my reasoning, which is a perfectly acceptable approach. Even if we agree that free will doesn't exist, we must test out our reasoning, and I wouldn't want to be using an argument that's bad, even if the conclusion is true. To summarize, though, I don't follow soft determinism, but rather appeal to various forces beyond our control which determine our thoughts and actions. Now, for the study I cited, we come to James's main critique, in which he accepts the study as valid and says he's only going off of what I said about it, which I'll admit is rather limited. What I said was that the scientists were able to predict what people would consciously choose up to 5 seconds ahead of time. James says that he finds this unconvincing, unpowerful, unforceful. However, what does perplex me is that he alludes to my point leading to the Cartesian theater, which originally was an idea Dan Dennett had as a way to negatively caricature René Descartes' idea of dualism. It's the idea that within our minds there is a sort of homunculus, another entity responsible for our conscious experience. Now, at no point did I allude to anything other than our brains being responsible for our conscious experience, and I state quite strongly that our brains are entirely responsible for our conscious experience. Now, rather than rely on or promote the idea of dualism of any sort, the study I mentioned supports the opposite conclusion. Rather than a single entity using our brain as some sort of processing machine, the various parts of the processing machine come together to form consciousness. Our brains work sort of like a committee. So if, for example, you see someone who you're sexually attracted to, how do you respond to that? Part of your brain is working to achieve the goal of either companionship or sex, but another part of your brain is trying to prevent the pain of rejection in front of, sorry, let me do that again. Another part of your brain is trying to prevent the pain of rejection, while another is factoring in the risk in approaching the person with their friends around, which affects the part of the brain avoiding rejection because Rejection in front of a group of people lowers your status in the group and increases your risk of further rejection down the line. Now, all of this information can manifest itself in nervousness, or the idea to check yourself to make sure you're looking okay, or perhaps an abandonment altogether of the attempt because the risk was considered too great for the reward. You're not aware of all these processes, but you know they exist because you can hone in on them if you sit down and think about it for long enough. This is generally what happens in psychological therapy sessions. You delve into your own behavior to better understand why you do the things you do. If your decisions were made entirely by the conscious parts of your mind, this would be entirely unnecessary. You know exactly why you did what you did, but so often we really don't. Most of the time, some people spend decades of their lives trying to uncover the source of their behavior, and this flies in the face of the idea that our behavior is generated by conscious experience, somehow cut off from the whole of physics. The fact that we can predict a conscious choice based off of looking at an MRI of the brain means that there are unconscious determinants to our decisions. To summarize, consciousness is the result of your brain processes, which are themselves the result of physics. A criticism I received in the chat was that it was ridiculous to ask why ad infinitum, because you can do that with anything. And sure, I agree with that, but I'm not asking why ad infinitum. We have good and valid explanations for our behavior, and to lead people to those good, valid explanations, I need to ask why a couple times. And those explanations show that our decisions are affected by things outside of what we would consider our will, and thus our wills are only the result of physical processes. Lastly, a user by the name of Divergent Mind, and I thought this would be better for the blog, and the video rather than 5 YouTube comments, is that they ask why consciousness evolved if it is merely determined and therefore does not give any benefits. After thinking about it, I think the premise is flawed. Consciousness is the ability to recognize that you exist and contemplate your own experiences. So when you still feel hungry after gorging yourself, you can think, if I wait 15 minutes, I'll probably feel full, perhaps I shouldn't continue eating. Without that conscious experience, without that ability, we would continue to eat until our brains got the signal to stop. We see such things in the animal kingdom all the time, in fact. So rather than involve a single mechanism for quickly knowing when you're satisfied, a separate mechanism for recognizing when you should ignore or listen to your pain, and 1,000 other mechanisms that would take thousands of generations to form, consciousness allows us to adapt more quickly to a scenario and understand why we're feeling the way we do, and adapt that knowledge to make actions that are more likely to be of benefit to us. Now, a response to this might be that I'm describing free will, your will or conscious mind imposing itself on the unconscious portions of the brain. There are 2 problems with that, and the first is that your conscious mind's ability to do this is determined by the sections of your unconscious mind. At best, number 2 is that it establishes a feedback loop in which both the conscious and unconscious affect each other, and neither is totally responsible for the end product. And still, you don't have freedom of will. Just like the processor of a computer isn't solely responsible for the program running, it requires cooperation from all portions to get the final result. In summary, I'm not a compatibilist, I'm not a dualist, and conscious experience is caused by chemical reactions that are subject to the laws of physics. Have a nice day, and thank you, James, for the response. Always happy to hear from you, and I hope we can continue a dialogue or just talk about something else entirely. But as long as this session just continues, I'm happy. Have a nice day. Honest Discussioner, out.